Good morning everybody and welcome to the video. In this video we are going to do a hands-on lab with essentially Apache Hudi and DBT. What is the project? Let me explain. Apache Hudi Datalake with DBT, a hands-on lab transforming Hudi raw tables with DBT and Glue interactive session. Alright, let me go straight into a demo or essentially the project. So let's get started. So the project is you are a senior data engineer, right? And these are the data loaders, right? These are basically loading data into the raw Hudi table. Again, you don't have to worry about this part. Assume these data loaders are essentially inserting data into the raw Hudi table. They might be doing so with a various ways. For example, they might have a kinesis stream and a glue streaming job, pouring the data into the raw table, or basically doing a batch oriented process. And basically data is coming into the data lake, that is the raw Hudi table. From there, we're going to transform the data using a DBT. Now, if you don't know more about DBT, basically in the ELT, right? So DBT is basically the T part of that, right? So we're going to transform the data and essentially we're going to make beautiful aggregated views, right? So basically, for example, in this project, we want to answer questions such as, okay, how many order came with respect to state, with respect to city, right? Basically, for a given category, how many orders do I get, So basically, I want to have these numbers, right? Matrix, right? So we're going to transform that data essentially that is in the raw zone using DBT. So again, we have our transform data, right? And basically our choice is S3. We're going to use S3 for our data lake purposes. Then we are going to integrate our BI tool, that is AWS QuickSight. Data science team can basically run analytic ad hoc queries on that using Athena. ML team can directly consume the raw data for their machine learning purposes. That is what we're going to build in this project. So I hope you're excited. So without wasting any further time, let's get straight into action. So just to show you like a little demo here, so here you can see I have a raw, and after DBT transform I'll have essentially two more tables. So the order table is the raw one, the cleansed is where I rename the columns, and this is the gold zone basically where I have an aggregate. So basically you can see state and there how many invoices I have for that particular state, right? So basically the way the data works is basically we have a raw zone, and from there raw we have a silver zone where we essentially rename, cleanse the data, and from there we build the gold zone, which is where we have our aggregates. Okay, so that's essentially what we are gonna build. So step one of the project is straightforward. Download the GitHub repository and I'll walk you over the code base, what you need to do, right? So if you download the repository, there will be three folders: DBT Glue, DBT Glue Notebook, and Infra. So go to the Infra one and then open in the terminal, basically as you can see here. And then basically what you need to do is you need to deploy this, right? So basically here I have essentially created all the policy for you. So deploy this. Simply to deploy the stack, all you gotta do is say npx sls deploy. I've already deployed the stack, and if you observe, if I go to the IAM, you would need this. So now come here to the IAM. So go to IAM. And then in the IAM, head over to the role section and basically search for Glue Interactive Notebook. So here you can see that's the one, right? And then copy the ARN. We'll need it. We'll basically need this for the DBT part. Once you have the ARN, now the next step is basically to install all the requirements. So if you see in the project directory, you have a folder called requirements.txt. Open that in the terminal and install all of these requirements. You can do that by saying pip3 install -r requirements.txt, and basically all the dependency will be installed. After that, basically what we need to do is, make sure you can run the command dbt over here on the console, and you should get certain output here. If that does, then basically what you need to do is basically now go to your computer and basically go to essentially the C drive. And then basically go to the user section and then go to your name and then search for a file called dbt over here. In this you will have something called profiles, and in the notepad you will essentially paste this what I essentially give you. Okay, so paste all of these here, and here you will essentially replace the ARN, right? So this is the ARN that was essentially created by our serverless framework. Choose the appropriate bucket that you want to use for the project. I'm going to use the bucket called Sawmill DMS Learn. Again, I'm going to use a database called HudiDB, right? So that's basically my configuration, okay? And in the connection section, I'm going to use a Hudi marketplace connector. The next step is straightforward. Basically, we need to essentially insert certain data into the raw zone, and essentially for that I'm gonna use Glue notebook to insert some fake data into basically a Hudi raw zone. Okay, and I'll show you that right now. So now we'll basically head over to the Glue notebook and essentially insert certain fake data points here. Okay. As you can see, I have configured my notebook, which will be there in the description section below. So basically here you can see I have essentially configured certain parameters. I'm in the US West 2, G1X, 2 workers, and using Glue Marketplace connector, Hudi Marketplace connector. After that, I'm gonna generate some fake data. These are basically a Spark data frame which has invoice ID, item, category, price, quantity, etc., certain data points, right? And then basically I'm gonna write that data into the Hudi table. Here I'm gonna create a database called Hudi DB. The table name is gonna be order. This is gonna simulate our raw zone in our data lake. Okay. So now I'm gonna insert that data. Once the insert is complete, if you head over to the Glue console, you will see a database called Hudi DB and essentially a table inside that called orders inside that. So as you can see, that is complete. Now I'll basically come to my S3, and here you can see I have a folder called Hudi. Inside that I have a Hudi DB, and here is my table called order. Same thing you should be able to observe under the Glue database section. Here you can see, and now if needed, you can now start running ad hoc queries here. So now you can see I'm gonna run a simple query, and here you can see that's my raw data. At this point in the architecture, we have essentially the raw data. Now essentially we're gonna leverage the DBT to transform the data from the raw zone to the transform section. So now basically you will see a folder called as a DBT Glue, right? So what you need to do is you need to come to that folder, and basically I'm gonna walk you over the configuration that I have done. Before that, since you have installed DBT, so now what you need to do is you need to go to your computer, actually my PC. So open up that, go to C drive, then basically you need to head over to the user, go to your username, and then there will be a folder called DBT. Then here there is a file called profiles, and here you will essentially paste all the configuration that I've given you. Here put the ARN that we generated to the serverless framework, right? The first step that I essentially showed you. Here is the database name, and basically here you can see where you're gonna use a Hudi Marketplace connector. Okay. So this is pretty straightforward. Now what I want to do is, in this point I have my raw data. Basically what I'll do is I'll select certain column, let's say A, B, and C. Then I'm gonna rename these columns, and I'm essentially gonna put the data into the cleanse folder. After the data is there in the cleanse folder, I'm essentially gonna generate an aggregate. So basically for a given state, how many invoices are there, right? I wanna basically generate views. So that's basically what we're gonna do through DBT. That is essentially the transforming part. So in the model section, you'll see there's a folder called matrix, and over here you should see 3 files: viewState.sql, schema.yml, cleansed order.sql, and there's a file called sourcetable.yml in the outer directory. This basically tells that I have a table called order on my data lake. Here you can see, right? That's basically what it's trying to say. And I'm giving it a name called data source. You can name it anything that you like. Then over here, if you come to the file called cleanse order.sql, now this is where the incremental part happens. So here I'm saying that I want to create a new table, and here we're going to incrementally load data from the raw zone, which is over here, right? So from the raw zone, we're going to incrementally load into the cleanse folder, right? So this is the settings for that. I'm saying materialized as incremental, file format as Hudi, incremental strategy as merge, selecting the unique keys. I'm using cow model, primary, and the pre-com key. After that, here is a select statement. In DBT, everything is almost a select statement. So here I'm saying select invoice, category, destination, item ID. So basically from my data lake, from this particular table, I'm selecting certain columns. So here I'm selecting 4 columns, right? And then what I'm doing essentially is I'm essentially renaming these columns. So I'm saying invoice ID as invoice ID. So if you observe, I'm standardizing the naming convention over here. So that is basically simulating that we have cleansed the data. So basically, if I quickly had to show you this, if I expand this. So from raw zone, basically we selected certain column, we essentially cleansed the column name, and here we have the cleanse zone. Now from the cleanse zone, we are going to generate an aggregates, right? So that's what we're going to show you. So this will basically generate a new table. And if I show you schema.yml, here you can see I have defined that. So I want to create a table called cleansed order. And these are basically the columns that will be inside that: invoice ID, again category, destination state, item ID, etc., etc., etc. So these are the columns that will be there inside that. Okay. Now, once that is done, you will see a file called viewState.sql. Now, again, this is pretty straightforward. We are creating a new table. We are basically generating an aggregate view for the business user, right? And here we are saying select state, count everything, count total number of invoices, and basically, group by state and order by state in the ascending order. So basically this, what it does is basically I'm creating an aggregate from my cleansed data over here. So for a given state, I want to see how many invoices are there, right? Basically, that's the report that I'm trying to generate. So again, all of this I'm doing through a DBT. So that's basically that. Again, in DBT, everything is basically a select statement, right? So basically, if you observe carefully, I'm selecting my data and I'm saying that this data, I'm naming it as a variable called cleansed order. And then essentially I'm saying select star from cleansed order, which means it's gonna create a new table. If you just wanna watch the demo, I can show you. So now you can say DBT run. Now this might take about 3 to 4 minutes, and hence I'm gonna pause the video and resume once it is done. Again, observe I do not have any tables here, but once this is complete, this should generate certain table. What this does is basically it leverages a Glue interactive session, and it's gonna execute these queries on the Spark, again Glue interactive session, and generate these tables, okay? Again, quickly, I just want to show you the data lake part as well. So here you can see in the folder called Hudi, I do not have any cleansed folder or aggregate folder, but after this is complete, I should see these folders popping into that pretty quickly. So I'll wait and I'll resume once this is complete. So as you can see, all the tests have been passed, and then essentially it says completed successfully, right? So now if I go to my Glue, if I go to Athena, I'm basically over here, and if I refresh, I should see all these tables coming in shortly. There you go, cleansed order, right? So now the cleanse zone is basically we have selected certain columns, and we have essentially, if you observe, normalize the naming convention, yeah, right? So that's the cleanse zone, right? And basically now in the state that is a view, this is our gold zone, basically our aggregates, right? Where the business can see, okay, for a given state, what is the total, basically total count of the invoices. This is a true real world project because again, you have your data loaders, which is loading data into the raw zone. From the raw zone, you're essentially taking the data, loading it incrementally, cleansing the data into the cleanse zone, and from the cleanse zone, basically you're generating aggregates, views, etc., etc., etc. Now you can easily connect this into QuickSight and essentially build BI dashboard. I would want to show you one more thing, that is the aggregates, right? So essentially incremental data processing. So here I'm gonna again append more data into the raw zone. So again, I'm appending about 100 records here. As you can see, I'm gonna run the cell. Now this means that more data came into the raw zone, and we want to process that incrementally. So once this is done, again, once this cell is done, what I'm going to do is again, I'm going to run the DBT, and again, we're going to do incremental processing. So here you can see the cell is complete. Now if I go to the raw zone, right? So now if I quickly go to the raw, which is the order table, this is the raw zone, right? And what I want to show you is basically the count. Again, there might be duplicates here, right? This is the raw zone, which may have duplicates if needed, right? So 103, right? Now basically what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna run my DBT command and see if the data is coming incrementally into my cleansed and the stuff, okay? So let me do that. So I'm gonna run the DBT command, and I'll resume once this is complete, because this might take a little while, okay? So it has started, and I'm gonna resume once this is complete. My DBT run is now complete. Now I'll basically head over to Athena. I'm gonna just refresh this. And here you can see I still have all these tables, right? So if I go to cleanse one, I should see more data coming in here, okay? So if I remove the limit query, if I do a limit, again, now as you can see, the data has been loaded incrementally into that. Let's take a look at the view state one. So let's see if we have an aggregate and if that has also been updated or not. And here you can see now the aggregates have also been updated. As you can see, this is a truly amazing project which you can try, play with it, learn this. This is again true real world projects. Basically, this is a true real world project that data engineers are usually working with, right? You have your raw zone, you're going from raw to cleanse zone, from cleanse to essentially gold. That is essentially your aggregates, views, etc., etc. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope this video will help you, and all the code and resources can be found on the description section below. So do not hesitate to try this out during your free time. With that being said, keep smiling, keep programming. If you have questions, list them in the comments and I'll try my best to answer that. Thank you, and I'll see you guys in the next video.